Anybody who's interested in buying the rival Lomachenko sparring gloves, which I'm selling on eBay, now is your last chance, because the auction is going to end in a couple hours and they will sell. These are a limited edition. Rival do not make them or sell them anymore, and they are a collector's item. I did see one barefaced liar in the comment section of one of my previous videos claiming that you can still buy these gloves brand new for £250 on the Rival website. That is an outright lie. As I mentioned previously, Rival do still sell Guerrero sparring gloves, but not with the Lomachenko branding, because Lomachenko is no longer sponsored by Rival. He is sponsored by Venom now. Rival do not make and do not sell these gloves anymore. That's a fact. Go check the Rival website for yourself. Actually, go and call Rival up, because they have a store here in the UK, and ask them specifically, do you sell the Lomachenko branded Guerrero sparring gloves? And they will tell you no. You know why they'll tell you no? Because they don't sell them. Because they were a limited edition while Lomachenko was still with Rival. He's now with Venom. And perhaps this idiot who tried to claim that you can still buy them from the Rival website is somebody who planned to bid on these gloves himself. I don't know. Maybe he was trying to put other people off bidding for them by doing that. But either way, plenty of people have bid. They are going to go today. So if you want to have an opportunity to own a rare collector's item, which Rival do not manufacture or sell anymore, then head on over to the eBay store. The link is in the description below. There was a heavyweight upset of sorts in the United States over the weekend. Michael Coffie losing his unbeaten record to Jonathan Rice. I've seen both these fighters before. I watched Michael Coffie knock out Damani Rock. From memory, I think he dropped Rock several times, and it was a pretty impressive performance. He showed fast hands. It says here that he's an orthodox fighter, but I've seen him box out of a southpaw stance, certainly against Rock and at points against Jonathan Rice. So coming into this, Michael Coffie, 35 years of age, although I've seen on Fox before some discrepancy between the age they give for him and the age that is listed for him on BoxRec. So either way, he's in his, let's say, mid-30s. At that age, you obviously need to move a guy quickly, but you also want to be careful with who you match him with. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. Now, Jonathan Rice is one of those fighters who, in the ring, just based on his physical attributes and his technique, he looks better than his record suggests, because this is a guy with a decent level of athleticism for somebody who's 6'5". This is a guy who's pretty fluid. This is a guy who appears to have decent power on his punches, and his technique looks more than competent. But when you look at his record, 14-6 and a draw, and you see that he's been losing fights virtually since the beginning. His first professional fight was a majority draw. Then his fourth fight was a loss. Goes on to lose to people like Stephen Shaw, Tony Yoka, and that was Tony Yoka's second pro fight. Another loss here, another loss here, and then the Efe Ajagba fight, which I saw as well. So, yeah, not the most impressive record when you look at it for Jonathan Rice, but when you see him in the ring, there is talent there, there's ability there. And as such, I don't think this is the last prospect that he's going to turn over, if you want to call Michael Coffie a prospect. Now, coming back to what I said a while ago with regards to you need to be careful about who you're going to match somebody like Michael Coffie with, despite the fact you got to move him quick. Jonathan Rice was picked as a late replacement opponent. To me, that is terrible matchmaking by his team. If you have got a green fighter who is at an advanced age for a green fighter, right? 35 years of age. Yes, you want to take risks, but you want to take calculated risks. You don't want to take risks on the fly. You don't want to schedule a fight for your guy. You've looked at the opponent. You looked at the opponent. You know who he is. You've been training for him. Then at the last minute, he has to pull out for whatever reason. And then you replace him with Jonathan Rice. You don't want to do that. That's terrible matchmaking. You want to replace the guy you were going to put Michael Coffie in with You want to replace him with a complete pudding, a donut, a cupcake. That's what you want to do. Yeah, if you're going to take a risk with this guy, it has to be a very calculated risk. It has to be a fighter who you've studied, who you've specifically trained for, who you've been very careful in picking. And it might be a decent test. Don't get it twisted. But when a guy is this age and he's a prospect, you need to be careful in situations like this. If he was younger, I wouldn't have so much of an issue. It's still not great matchmaking, but I wouldn't have so much of an issue with the Jonathan Rice situation because things happen in heavyweight boxing. But at that age, nah, you need to be more calculated than that. You need to be more careful than that. So really from the start, Michael Coffie was having problems with Jonathan Rice, having problems with Jonathan Rice's distance because Rice was keeping his distance real well, despite the fact that Coffie had the slightly longer reach according to BoxRec anyway. Rice, who apparently has spent a lot of time in the Tyson Fury training camp, was just much more fluid than Michael Coffie. Was getting his shots off better, was controlling the range, as I say, better. And to me, it looked like the writing was on the wall fairly early on in this fight. Michael Coffie came in with a great deal of confidence. And maybe that's something that he's been lacking. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he's had so many losses in such few pro bouts, because he's only had 21 bouts, already 6 losses and a draw. Perhaps he's one of these guys who just doesn't have the confidence for boxing. Well, he's obviously been boxing a while, but I'm talking about to make it to the next levels in boxing. You need a certain degree of confidence. Maybe that's something that's been lacking for Jonathan Rice, just not enough confidence. Maybe being in the Tyson Fury training camp has given him more confidence. Also, the fact that he was going up against a guy who I'm not sure how much amateur experience Michael Coffie has. I think it was fairly minimal. In fact, let me just check now. Okay, here we go. And by the way, BoxRec is not as comprehensive when it comes to amateur records as it is to professional records. So I don't know whether this is the full record of Michael Coffie as an amateur. But yeah, he doesn't have many fights here. Although Nkosi Solomon, I know he was a pretty useful amateur. And wasn't he signed to Matchroom briefly? I'm not sure if he still is. But he had 2 fights against him. Both guys are from New York, I believe. Well, we know Michael Coffie, as it says it there. Nkosi Solomon, I think, is too. So, according to this, his amateur career wasn't that extensive. And to my knowledge, Jonathan Rice's amateur career wasn't that extensive either. And perhaps that gave Jonathan Rice some confidence, seeing as he was going in against somebody who was in the same boat as himself with regards to experience. Sometimes it can be daunting for a fighter to go in there against a guy who they know has been boxing since they were 12 years of age, when they only started, I don't know, late, didn't have many amateur bouts, have learned in the gym sparring as the sparring partner, not as the main guy, deferring to the main guy. Sometimes they can get into a sparring partner mentality. Well, in this instance, Jonathan Rice was not in a sparring partner mentality. He really took it to Michael Coffie from early on, established control, and he had to evade some pretty hefty looking swings from Michael Coffie, but he did so, and he eventually got the stoppage. And Michael Coffie, at one point in that 5th round, looked at the referee as if the referee was going to stop the fight. Or I think the referee might have said something to him, and Michael Coffie turned to him and said, "Yeah, I'm fine." Something like that. Moments later, Michael Coffie, who looked like he had a swollen eye, was being saved by the referee, and he looked like he wanted to be saved. I'm not saying he quote unquote quit, but he didn't look like a guy who was devastated that the fight got waved off. Let's just put it that way. He was giving out distress signals, and I'm sure I'm going to assume he was relieved when the referee stepped in to stop it, at least temporarily, because after that temporary relief, it then dawns on you that you've lost your unbeaten record and all that comes with it, because there's a certain prestige, right? Especially when you're a prospect, that comes with having an unbeaten record. You can walk around with your chest out. I'm an unbeaten heavyweight. There's people in your team. He's the next heavyweight champion. You know how it goes. But when you've just taken a loss and a stoppage loss against a late replacement opponent, yeah, it might be a temporary relief to be out of the firing line when you're under serious pressure and you're taking punishment. But then maybe even moments later, you'll think to yourself, oh no, I've lost my unbeaten record. People are not going to look at me quite the same. And at 35 years of age, it's a hard road back. You know, how are they going to market this guy as a prospect now? A lot of guys in Michael Coffie's position actually go on to be journeymen when they turn pro so late and they lose a fight like this, a fight which on paper I guess they were supposed to win. They end up basically losing their momentum. They're no longer matched as favorably. In this case, he wasn't matched very favorably, but they're no longer matched as favorably generally. And that is usually the start of a downward slide. You know, once you're that age and you start losing, promoters, networks, they're not going to do you so many favors. They're going to think of you as an opponent rather than the A side in a lot of instances. So we'll have to see what happens with Michael Coffie. But for Jonathan Rice, I definitely think that this is a guy who might be a Buster Douglas. Might be. I'm not saying he will be. I'm saying there's the potential there because, like Buster Douglas, he's had a very shaky start to his professional career. Those of you who don't know about Buster Douglas and all you know about him is the Mike Tyson fight, go check his box rec. Go check his early fights on YouTube if you can find them. And you'll see that he had multiple losses going into the Mike Tyson fight. And several of them were a relatively low level. I know he lost to Tony Tucker in a previous world title tilt, but he'd lost other fights at a relatively low level, Buster Douglas. This is not a guy who was highly touted and highly regarded in the heavyweight division when he pulled off the biggest upset of all time. That's why it was the biggest upset of all time. I mean, going into the fight, Larry Merchant of HBO referred to Buster Douglas as a journeyman fighter. That's the way he was perceived. So Jonathan Rice could be perceived in the same way as a journeyman fighter, or at least by some, if you go off his record, right? But like Buster Douglas, he has some talent there. See, Buster Douglas was always a guy that had talent, just didn't quite have the teeth to make it at the top level previously. Yeah. He was a guy who the media openly questioned his heart. Openly. Now, Jonathan Rice, I don't know whether the media has been questioning his heart. Maybe they've been questioning his belief. I don't know. His stamina. But he managed to get himself back on a winning, I want to say streak, is only one fight at the moment. But he's back to winning ways. Let's see if he can put some more wins together. And just keep an eye on this guy. Again, given the fact that he's lost so many fights already, you're not expecting him to become a serious force in the heavyweight division. But against prospects coming up, maybe as a late replacement opponent for a top 10 fighter, potentially at some point, if somebody takes their eye off the ball, they could have problems with this guy. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Jonathan Rice turning over Michael Coffie. Were you surprised by this? Perhaps you weren't surprised by this. Perhaps you've seen both fighters before. See, I had no idea this fight was even happening. I saw it after the fact. But for those of you who did know the fight was happening, were you expecting some kind of upset here? Apparently there were odds of like 10-1 you could get on Jonathan Rice. So if you put some money on him, well, you would have won a nice little bet there. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this bout before and after in the comments below.